hope and responsibility captured in one simple statement. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we must call to the world from Nairobi today and make it clear that it is past time to address the tough issues. It is past time to hold the difficult but much needed conversations on Africa, risk, perception, reality, resources, policies, regulations, systems. And it's past time for these conversations to be guided by equity. That is what we need.
And Africa has the resources and assets, including mineral and energy resources, agricultural capacity, and natural capital to promote the global decarbonization agenda. But to realize this potential, the world needs to do its own part in helping steer Africa on the pathway to an inclusive, sustainable, and progressive future. At the fundamental level, that will require decoupling economic growth from environmental degradation. In the words of the late Wangari Maathai, an icon of Kenya and a Nobel Peace Laureate, and I quote, "We are very fond of blaming the poor for destroying the environment, but often it is the powerful, including governments, that are responsible," end quote. In other words, we are all in this together. It will require our combined efforts to overcome this challenge. The spirit of Harambee, as we say in Kiswahili.
And that means, for those of you who don't know, let's all pull together, let's work together for a common goal and purpose. Zain, thank you for reminding us. We have icons, we have role models all over the continent doing incredible things. Thank you so much. We also have a young, innovative workforce. There's so much potential. So our call is, let's pull together. Thank you for coming. Thank you for ensuring you listen and are present and will act around a climate agenda determined by the African continent. An agenda that is going to safeguard our people, our communities, livelihoods on the continent, our economies, and ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, when we safeguard Africa, we safeguard the world. Can we give that a round of applause, please? Please. Safeguarding Africa is safeguarding the world.
Now, to help guide us on this journey with an incredible lineup of speakers, please give a very warm welcome to the Honorable Soipan Tuya, Cabinet Secretary, Environment, Climate Change and Forestry for the Government of Kenya. Mheshimiwa.
Thank you.
Excellency, President William Ruto, our host president, all our visiting heads of state here with us today, all distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. History documents that Africa, and Kenya in particular, is the cradle of mankind. It is my hope and prayer that out of the cradle of mankind comes the all-time elusive solution to combating climate change. African-led solutions to decarbonize and steer a low-carbon development pathway for the globe. We are gathered here today to make history as the continent of Africa. The world is facing many challenges, but none has become so apparent, so threatening, and so devastating as the threat of climate change. And we can only respond by making history at this inaugural Africa Climate Summit. Everywhere we look in Africa, there is a climate change-related story to tell. For example, in Malawi, Hurricane Freddy led to the loss of 200 people and nearly $2 billion US dollars worth of damage occasioned. Last year, the Horn of Africa came out of one of the worst droughts in decades, where we lost hundreds of lives and thousands of livestock. In fact, for the first time in Kenya, we had to track water for our wildlife in the national parks and reserves. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, although African countries are making every available effort to deal with the vagaries of climate change, our economies are continuing to be weighed down by mounting debts. As we speak, 31 out of the 37 heavily indebted poor countries in the world are in Africa. Over 20 years of climate change negotiations have yielded agreements and promises that have delivered very little for Africa. Instead, the imagery of Africa as a poor continent, a victim, keep dominating the climate negotiations year in, year out. The fact that Africa has historically contributed very little to the global emissions has remained an inconvenient truth, yet receiving no reciprocity from the rest of the world for the contribution we make. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this inaugural Africa Climate Summit presents an opportunity like no other for Africa to change the course of history. Millions of young Africans are looking up to African leaders here to leave them with a promise, a visible promise, to make them feel that there is a future where they have hope to get green jobs, live a dignified life, and thrive. We are looking to the summit to chart a green growth pathway for the African continent, set the stage for Africa to lead the globe towards a more ecologically responsible global industrialization, catalyzed by financing that is accessible, adequate, and affordable. The world is waiting for something anew out of this week. We must not be held hostage to the past, but allow ourselves to reimagine a future where, as Africa, we lift ourselves from the fatigue of despair and make history. Excellencies, I am persuaded that the time is now, and I beseech us to respond to this historical call by proposing radical solutions to the world that will help us deal with the climate change. I invite us to listen to the inner urge calling us to serve humanity, that we go down in history, that it is out of Africa, the cradle of mankind, that the solution for climate change came forth. Excellencies, allow me now to invite, to kick us off, the President of the African Development Bank, who has been in the middle of this discourse and supporting a lot of support to the cause. Welcome, Dr. Adesina Akiwumi.
Thank you very much, Cabinet Secretary. Your Excellency, William Ruto, President of Kenya, and our gracious host, and my dear brother. Your Excellency Azali Assoumani, President of Comoros and Chairperson of the African Union. Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government. Your Excellencies, the First Ladies. Your Excellency Moussa Faki, Chairperson of the African Union Commission. Your Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations. We are also joined today by Your Excellency Ban Ki-moon, former Secretary General of the United Nations. Your Excellency Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission. Your Excellency Mustafa Madhoudi, Prime Minister of Egypt. Your Excellency Sultan Al-Jaber, COP28 President-designate, honorable ministers, ambassadors, heads of diplomatic missions, the amazing youth and women of Africa. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning, everyone. Habari Sir Asubuhi. I think I got it right somehow. I wish to commend you, Your Excellency President Ruto, for your excellent leadership in convening this Africa Climate Summit, and for your dynamic and passionate leadership in spearheading Africa's first climate summit. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you for hosting us all in this beautiful nature-blessed country of Kenya. The African Development Bank is pleased to be a major sponsor of the Africa Climate Summit. The presence in such large numbers of Your Excellencies, heads of state and government, ministers and development partners from around the world says it all. Africa's voice on climate change will resonate across the world. The Africa Climate Summit will shape the future pathway of Africa's development. We gather because the people of Africa expect us to act. We gather because the future of the youth of Africa is at stake. We gather because we must galvanize global actions on climate. We gather because our collective existence is at risk. Climate change is short-changing Africa. Droughts and floods have been increasing across the continent. No country is spared. As we gather today, if we strain our ears enough, we will hear the calls of urgency from farmers whose crops and livestock are being destroyed, the voices of fishing folks whose catch is reducing and livelihoods are being imperiled, the voices of the young whose future is being compromised, the voices of women and children who bear the brunt of climate change, the voices of economies unable to cope with the ever-rising costs of climate-induced risks. We have a duty and responsibility to hear these voices and to act with a greater sense of urgency. And responding requires action at three levels. At the global level, the developed economies must meet their commitment to provide $100 billion annually in climate finance. The global climate financial architecture must be changed to prioritize the needs of Africa. At the national level, we must accelerate actions on climate adaptation. And that is why the African Development Bank has committed to providing $25 billion towards climate finance by 2025. We have also launched the African Adaptation Acceleration Program, together with the Global Center on Adaptation, the largest climate adaptation program in the world. Africa must develop with what it has, not what it does not have. Africa is blessed with large sources of renewable energy in the world. Renewables from solar, hydro, wind, and geothermal. But we cannot power Africa with potential. We must fully unlock Africa's renewable energy potential. That's why the African Development Bank is implementing a $20 billion Desert to Power program to harness the power of solar and deliver electricity for 250 million people. We must power every home, every school, every hospital, and provide stable, affordable, and reliable power. But we must, Your Excellencies, be pragmatic. Africa must use its natural gas and combine it with renewable resources. The International Energy Agency's analysis shows that doing so would only add 0.5% to global emissions. Give us space to grow. We must ensure that Africa's food and agricultural systems are climate resilient. The African Development Bank's flagship program, Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation, has provided 12 million farmers in 21 countries with climate-resilient agricultural technologies. In Ethiopia, climate-resilient wheat varieties supported by the bank has helped it to become self-sufficient in wheat in just 3 years. We are acting at scale to feed Africa with climate resilience. Under the leadership of President Macky Sall, as the then chairperson of the African Union, and the strong leadership of you, our heads of state and government, we succeeded with the Feed Africa Summit held in Dakar in January. We developed food and agriculture delivery compacts for African countries. We have mobilized, Your Excellency Presidents, heads of state and government globally, $72 billion to support African countries to implement these food and agricultural delivery compacts and to assure food security and food sovereignty within 5 years, and doing so with climate-resilient agricultural systems. I wish to recognize all development partners from around the world and the African Union Commission who work so tirelessly with us to make this happen. Thank you very much. We will repeat this at the Africa Climate Summit with the development of climate change adaptation investment compacts to help channel financing to national climate adaptation action at scale. We must ensure that resources mobilized do not stay simply in government offices, but reach and protect the lives of people in our villages, in our towns, and in our cities. All lives must be protected from climate change. We must put the youth and women at the core of climate financing. That's why the African Development Bank and the Global Center on Adaptation are announcing here today the launch of a $1 billion facility for Youth Adapt program that will accelerate access to financing for the youth to tackle climate change. The youth are not just the future of Africa, the youth are the present of Africa. The African Development Bank is also rolling out the establishment of youth entrepreneurship investment banks, new financial institutions that will support and grow the businesses of the youth all across Africa. Finally, we must revalue, Your Excellencies, the wealth of Africa by accounting for the proper valuation of its abundant natural resources, including its vast forests that sequester carbon. Few may know that the Congo Forest Basin is the world's largest carbon lungs, larger than the Amazon forest. Yet, Africa's rich natural wealth and the global value of its carbon it sequesters for the world are not accounted for in the estimation of its GDP. It is not enough to praise Africa for its rich natural capital. Its GDP must take that into consideration. Africa's GDP must therefore be revalued based on its carbon sequestration and biodiversity, which provide global public goods. If this is done, the debt to adjusted GDP ratio of several African countries will be much lower, and they will have greater headroom to borrow more financing to support their development, including investing in the greening of their economies. We must, Your Excellencies, therefore, turn Africa's economies green, not because others ask us to do so, but because it is in our interest to do so. Africa must develop its own carbon markets, properly price its carbon, and turn its vast carbon sinks into new sources of enormous wealth. Africa cannot be nature rich and cash poor. As we look towards COP28, Africa needs must be front and center, powered by the leadership of our heads of state and government, our youth and the private sector, and the voices of our communities. We must be the vuvuzelas of climate financing for Africa. Together with partners from around the world, let's make it happen for Africa. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Gracias. Shukran. Asante sana.
Excellencies, our next speaker is His Excellency Musa Faki Mahamat, the chairperson of the African Union Commission. Welcome, Your Excellency. A formidable global reputation of peacekeeping. We know you have.
And we see this disparity, and that's why we set up in Kenya, and we're trying to develop.
Excellency Dr. William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, Excellency Azalia Soumani, President of the Union of the Comoros, and current chairman of the African Union, Excellencies, Head of State, Government and Delegation, Excellency Antonio Guterres, United Nations Secretary General, Excellency Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Union Commission, representatives of international organizations, financial institutions, civil society, youth, women, honorable ministers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. First and foremost, I would like to thank President William Ruto, the government and the people of Kenya for the exceptional hospitality accorded to us since our arrival in this hospitable and green capital, Nairobi. The beautiful and natural environment in this country augurs well for the great success of our climate summit. The organization of this climate summit in such friendly conditions in just 6 months, thanks to the decision of the African Union Summit last February, is striking proof of the excellence of your leadership, dear friend William. I sincerely congratulate you. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, le récent rapport du groupe international d'experts sur le changement climatique, GIEC, confirme nos craintes. L'Afrique se réchauffe plus rapidement que le reste du monde. Si le phénomène n'est pas stoppé, le changement climatique continuera à avoir un impact gravement toxique sur la croissance des économies africaines. La productivité agricole a été réduite de 34% entre 1961, depuis 1961 en raison des changements climatiques, plus que dans toute autre région, d'où une pression insoutenable sur les systèmes alimentaires africains. Les pays africains sont ainsi confrontés à des charges et à des risques disproportionnés découlant des phénomènes météorologiques imprévisibles, notamment des sécheresses prolongées et des inondations dévastatrices à tous les niveaux. Des crises humanitaires massives provoquent des effets néfastes sur l'économie, la santé, l'éducation, la paix et la sécurité, ainsi que d'autres risques connexes. À titre d'exemple, la saison 2022-2023, environ 18 millions de personnes ont été affectées par la sécheresse dans la seule corne de l'Afrique. Récemment, le cyclone tropical Fred a touché plus de 1,2 million de personnes et provoqué la mort de plus de 700. On estime également qu'entre 2019 et 2023, les pertes économiques dues aux catastrophes en Afrique se situent entre 20 et 35,5 milliards de dollars américains. Cette liste lugubre est sans fin. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, le changement climatique n'a épargné aucun secteur. Si l'on se rappelle que l'Afrique compte environ 400 millions de personnes qui n'ont pas accès à l'eau potable et environ 700 millions qui n'ont pas accès à un bon système d'assainissement et que les évaluations d'experts indiquent un déficit d'investissement entre 11 et 20 milliards de dollars par an jusqu'en 2023, on se rend alors compte que le continent est au bord d'un vrai drame consécutif aux dégradations de ses conditions climatiques. Évidemment, ce n'est pas le seul facteur et l'on a tort de ne pas intégrer ces données dans l'analyse globale des facteurs négatifs dont la gouvernance est au centre. Je ne voudrais pas céder au pessimisme et j'essaie qu'au tableau général, nous avons bien heureusement quelques lumières et de nombreux indicateurs favorables. Je ne peux cependant pas ne pas rappeler qu'environ 600 millions d'Africains sont privés d'électricité, tandis que 800 millions parmi eux n'ont pas accès à une cuisine propre et sont donc exposés à des infections respiratoires potentielles dues à la fumée. Les infrastructures sont également mises à mal par les changements climatiques. Et comme vous le savez tous, répondre aux besoins de l'Afrique en matière d'infrastructures et développer des services d'infrastructures rentables nécessite des financements considérables, estimés à environ 170 milliards de dollars par an. Il est en ce sens encourageant de constater que les gouvernements africains ont consacré environ 3,% de leur PIB au développement des infrastructures au cours des 20 dernières années. C'est trop peu par rapport à certains pays émergents. La Chine et l'Inde, par exemple, consacrent respectivement 7,7 et 5,2% de leur PIB aux infrastructures. L'on perçoit ainsi dans quelle direction orienter l'effort. Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, ce sommet nous offre une excellente occasion de traduire les ambitions climatiques de l'Afrique en opportunités d'action pratique et de consolidation de nos voix sur les questions brûlantes du changement climatique. En perspective du sommet des Nations Unies sur le climat et à la COP28 aux Émirats arabes unis. À ces rencontres d'importance mondiale, l'Afrique doit, entre autres défis, mettre en relief la situation préoccupante et parfois dramatique au Sahel, dans la Corne de l'Afrique où sécheresse et inondations alternent, au bassin du fleuve Congo, à la déforestation dangereuse et aux conséquences désastreuses des cyclones en Afrique australe et dans les États insulaires. Il est urgent que l'Afrique se présente à toutes ces rencontres avec des propositions concrètes à exécution sans report. Je réitère avec force mon appel de venir à ces deux prochaines rencontres avec des propositions précises, sans les noyer dans la littérature et la litanie habituelle, sur l'impératif d'une justice collective à l'Afrique, dont la responsabilité est bien limitée dans la pollution de la planète, avec une part inversement proportionnelle du volume d'investissement global dans l'environnement. Cet appel pour un rétablissement de la justice
global investment in the field of environment. This call for a restoration of justice for Africa would benefit from being supported by a real reform of the global financial architecture, for which a high-level panel is rightly devoted at this summit. Obviously, this reform must resolutely focus on the financial organs and structures, institutions which structure the universe, which operate far from Africa. In this desired reform, a question comes to mind: the weight of the debt and the financing gap of the SDGs. Africa alone represented a need of $1.3 billion per year for sustainable development needs by 2030, while the financing needs for SDGs in the same period were $2.5 billion for financing developing countries. Everyone knows that the public debt stock in sub-Saharan Africa at the end of 2023 was estimated at $1.1 trillion out of 650 billion SDRs mobilized. Africa received only 33 billion, which is only 4.5%. In view of these staggering figures and many others, it is clear that there is no relevant global intervention in favor of Africa without a credible solution for the crippling debt challenge of Africa. To aid the struggle, which include financing adaptation, $100 billion per year, Africa has galvanized its will in its common position through a momentum unifying African voices, and it will be a central point of our agenda in G20 as soon as we join it. However, in this struggle, Africa cannot just be satisfied with incantation. Just like for its independence, it is a challenge to rely on its own personal efforts, on its own genius, the quality and its virtues of bold, imaginative, united and interdependent leadership. I wish you full success to our deliberations. I thank you very much. Asante sana.
We are overwhelmed by the support that we have received for the summit, and we want to listen to each and every one of us. So I would like to plead with Your Excellencies that we stick to the agreed 5 minutes so that we can have everybody speaking to this. Next, Excellencies, out of COP27 in Egypt was the establishment of a loss and damage fund and the finalization of the details to implement the Santiago network. It was also the first time food security was recognized in the COP conversations. The Arab Republic of Egypt was a COP27 presidency, and it is my honor now to invite His Excellency Mustafa Madbouli, the Prime Minister of Egypt. Welcome, Your Excellency.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فخامة الرئيس ويليام روتو رئيس جمهورية كينيا، أصحاب الفخامة رؤساء الدول والحكومات والمؤسسات الدولية، السيدات والسادة، أود في البداية أن أنقل إليكم تحيات فخامة الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي رئيس جمهورية مصر العربية، وإنه لمن دواعي سروري وفخري أن أشارك باسم مصر في هذا الاجتماع رفيع المستوى. وأتقدم بخالص التهنئة والشكر لفخامة الرئيس روتو ودولة كينيا الشقيقة على استضافة الاجتماع، لا سيما وإنه يأتي بعد أشهر قليلة من نجاح مصر وقارتنا الأفريقية في استضافة أكبر مؤتمر للأمم المتحدة لتغير المناخ، بل وفي تاريخ العمل متعدد الأطراف حتى الآن. السيدات والسادة الحضور، تأتي قمتنا اليوم في الوقت الذي يشهد وبصفة خاصة قارتنا الأفريقية زيادة في وتيرة وحدة التبعات السلبية المقترنة بالتغيرات المناخية، من موجات جفاف بالقرن الأفريقي ومنطقة الساحل إلى حرائق غابات بالمغرب العربي، ومن أعاصير قاتلة بالجنوب الأفريقي إلى زيادة في درجات حرارة المحيطات وارتفاع سطح البحر بشواطئ مصر والدول الأفريقية المتوسطية، وكلها تؤثر بصورة مباشرة في استدامة المعيشة وتمثل ضغوطا جديدة ومتزايدة على مجتمعاتنا وعلى بلداننا الأفريقية. ولذلك فإن مصر ومن منطلق التزامها بالمساهمة الفعالة في الجهد الدولي لمواجهة والتعامل مع التغيرات المناخية عملت بشكل حثيث على الخروج بنتائج ملموسة في مؤتمر شرم الشيخ تسهم في الانتقال إلى مرحلة التنفيذ الفعلية عبر تسريع وتيرة تنفيذ الإجراءات والمشروعات على أرض الواقع، وتتعامل مع مطالب الدول النامية بتحقيق العدالة المناخية وتعزيز الجهد الدولي للتحول العادل والسريع للاقتصاد منخفض الانبعاثات والقادر على التعامل مع آثار تغير المناخ. وحرصت مصر كرئيس للمؤتمر على أن تكون شرم الشيخ محطة هامة لتسليط الضوء على خصوصية الاحتياجات والظروف الأفريقية في سياق الاستجابة للخطر الوجودي لتغير المناخ. وفي ذات السياق يأتي مؤتمرنا اليوم ليؤكد التزام قارتنا الأفريقية بتحقيق التحول العادل للاقتصاد الأخضر، ويدعم المطالب المشروعة بالحصول على نصيب عادل من الدعم المالي والتقني ومن تدفقات الاستثمارات الدولية، بما يسمح بالاستفادة من الإمكانيات الهائلة والموارد المتميزة في قارتنا، ليس فقط لتمويل مشروعات خفض الانبعاثات ولكن أيضا لمشروعات التكيف وبناء القدرة على الصمود، وبالإضافة إلى توفير دعم الدول النامية لمواجهة الخسائر والأضرار المرتبطة بالمناخ. وأؤكد في هذا الصدد على الدور الهام والمحوري الذي تقوم به لجنة رؤساء الدول والحكومات الأفريقية ومجلس وزراء البيئة الأفارقة ومجموعة المفاوضين الأفارقة في تسليط الضوء على أولوياتنا في مواجهة تغير المناخ وتبعاته. السيدات والسادة، يقع محور التوسع في الطاقة النظيفة ومصادر الطاقة الجديدة والمتجددة في قلب النموذج التنموي الجديد، وهو ما رحبت به دول القارة وترجمته في تعهداتها الوطنية بالتوسع في الطاقة المتجددة. وتحفل قارتنا بالأمثلة المبشرة والملهمة، بما في ذلك مصر التي وصلت لنحو 20% من إنتاج الطاقة من المصادر المتجددة، ساعية إلى الوصول إلى 42% بحلول عام 2030. وفي هذا الإطار أود الإشادة بالرؤية التي طرحتها الرئاسة الإماراتية لمؤتمر كوب 28 من خلال معالي الدكتور سلطان الجابر حول مستقبل الانتقال للطاقة المتجددة، وهي رؤية تعكس بوضوح الطموح المطلوب، وسيكون لها دور بالتأكيد في إنجاح مخرجات مؤتمر كوب 28 وتلبيته لتوقعات أفريقيا والعالم النامي. السادة الحضور، يظل النفاذ للتمويل هو عنق الزجاجة الذي يواجه أفريقيا والدول النامية من أجل تحويل خططها وأحلامها إلى واقع معاش يسهم في معالجة الأزمة المناخية، وفي نفس الوقت لا يمس بمسيرتها التنموية أو يثقل من ديونها. ويمثل اجتماعنا هذا فرصة ممتازة لتناول موضوعات تمويل المناخ، وتتمحور رؤية مصر في هذا الصدد حول العناصر التالية. أولا، ضرورة إعادة النظر في أدوات التمويل المتاحة حاليا والتحول إلى التمويل الميسر والمنح لتسريع وتيرة التحول المطلوب. ثانيا، أهمية مراجعة معايير تدفق الاستثمارات لضمان حصول القارة الأفريقية على نصيبها العادل من التمويل. ثالثا، التأكيد على أن تمويل المناخ وهو تمويل جديد وإضافي وليس سحبا من مخصصات الدعم التنموي. رابعا، ضرورة العمل على تفعيل آلية واحدة وفعالة ومناسبة لإعادة استخدام الديون الحالية من خلال آلية فعالة لتحويل الديون إلى تمويل المناخ. وفي هذا السياق نتطلع لأن يمثل مؤتمر دبي المقبل اختراقا في تنفيذ تعهد الدول المتقدمة بتوفير 100 مليار دولار سنويا لتمويل المناخ الذي لم يتم إدراكه رغم كونه ليس أكثر من التزام رمزي بالمسؤولية التاريخية المشتركة ومتباينة الأعباء. ختاما، فإنني أود إعادة التأكيد على أن طبيعة قضية تغير المناخ والتعامل معها لا يكون إلا من خلال منظور تعاوني قائم على تعزيز النظام متعدد الأطراف يؤسس على الإنصاف والعدالة ومراعاة الظروف الوطنية للدول. وأنتهز هذه الفرصة للثناء على ما طرحته جمهورية كينيا الشقيقة من عناصر ورؤية لصياغة نقاشاتنا في الأيام القادمة، ولأجدد التأكيد على دعم جمهورية مصر العربية الكامل بصفتها الوطنية وكرئيس للدورة الحالية لمؤتمر الأمم المتحدة للمناخ للنسخة المقبلة بدبي تحت رئاستها الإماراتية، التي نثق تماما في قدرتها والتزامها بالبناء على نتائج شرم الشيخ وإدراك المزيد من النتائج الإيجابية. وشكرا لحضراتكم.
Your Excellency, Excellencies, Africa is Europe's closest neighbor and our sister continent. Our geopolitics therefore concern each other. Europe and Africa have close economic, cultural, and geographical ties. To speak for the European Commission, I would now take this opportunity to invite Her Excellency Ursula von der Leyen, the European Union President. Welcome, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much. Dear President Ruto, for hosting this Africa Climate Summit. And thank you very much for your leadership on climate action ever since you took office. I very much welcome Kenya's Climate Change Act 2023 that was launched during this summit and that puts strong emphasis on carbon markets. We fully support you on this important topic. Presidents, Prime Ministers, fellow leaders, excellencies, I want to greet my colleague Moussa Faki, Chairman of the African Union. I want to greet the President Assoumani from the Comoros. I want to greet Secretary General Antonio Guterres, Dr. Sultan Al Jaber, President of the COP28, my fellow leaders, ladies and gentlemen. I am deeply honored to participate in this discussion. This summit is a crucial step to prepare the upcoming COP28 meeting and to make sure that Africa's voice resonates around the world and that Africa's priorities as a continent that is most affected by climate change are duly taken on board. Today, I'm here not only to listen to you, but also to bring Europe's offer to be your ally at COP28 and to work together on all issues on the agenda. Because however different our two continents may look, we share the same interests when it comes to climate action. We hear you, President Ruto, and dear friends, when you say that Africa's first priority is to grow your economy, yes, and lift as many people as possible out of poverty. Yes, you're so right. Climate action is part of the solution. You are part of the solution. With your huge potential for renewable energy and clean hydrogen, your critical raw materials, your incredible nature and biodiversity, and your young workforce, you can help clean up global energy systems and supply chains while creating good jobs here and economic opportunities yet that your people demand, rightly so. This is a win-win partnership which benefits Africa and the world. For instance, the benefits of expanding Africa's clean energy sector would be massive. By speeding up the transition to solar and wind power, energy sector jobs in Africa could double in a few years. And Africa could produce enough clean energy not only to power up your continent, but also to export abroad. Climate action can be one of the main drivers of Africa's growth. But for this, Africa needs massive investment. And Europe wants to be your partner, in closing this investment gap. First of all, we fully support the need for multilateral development bank reform. It is time to move from words to action, absolutely. Secondly, investment has to come. And this is why 150 billion euro in our investment plan are designated for Africa. We call it Global Gateway. They are aimed at the African continent. Global Gateway supports investments ranging from hydropower plants in the DRC, Burundi, Rwanda, and Tanzania, to the 1 billion euro initiative on climate adaptation and resilience in Africa, which we announced at COP27. And Global Gateway is unique in the global investment landscape. We're not only interested in extracting resources. We want to partner with you to create local value chains, to create good jobs here in Africa. We want to share European technology with you. We want to invest in skills for local workers. This is crucial for the young people, because the stronger you are as suppliers, the more Europe will diversify supply chains towards Africa, and the more we both will de-risk our economies. It's a clear win-win. Namibia, for instance, is now building a new hydrogen industry, as well as rare materials value chains in partnership with Europe. And later this morning, President Ruto and I will conclude a new hydrogen partnership between Kenya and the European Union, with the objective to further develop the green hydrogen economy, and with the full support of Team Europe. This is good news for Africa and for Europe alike. So we should work very closely as partner. Yet, public money from major economies, however crucial, is not enough. And this is why we need to bring the conversation on climate financing to the global stage at COP28. Let me briefly share 3 specific points that will be discussed here in Nairobi to pave the way towards COP28. First, on attracting private investment to Africa. Second, on carbon pricing and carbon credits. And third, on setting global targets for the energy transition. On the first point, the green transition will require an unprecedented scale of private investment. Public finance will not suffice. This is true for Europe, but it is also true for emerging market and developing economies. Private capital will need to be mobilized at scale. And here, green bonds are widely recognized as providing part of the solution. This is why we just put forward a new proposal to attract private investment. It's called Global Green Bonds Initiative. We know that emerging economies can face hurdles to access capital markets, but we can change that together. Europe has the biggest and most advanced green bond market in the world, so we are ready to share our expertise with your teams on how to develop your own green bond markets, and at the same time, we will push on the investor side. Together with the European Investment Bank and our member states, we are allocating €1 billion to de-risk private investments in emerging markets. This could help to attract up to €20 billion in sustainable investment. So, let's work together on that to build and grow Africa's green bond markets, and let us bring together this crucial point to COP28. There's another solution that would unlock huge resources for climate action in Africa, and that is carbon pricing and true carbon credits. And this is my second point. I believe, as you do, President Ruto, that setting a price on carbon emissions is one of the most efficient and one of the most effective tools in our hands, because it fosters innovation by the private sector, that's crucial, because it makes heavy polluters pay a fair price, that is necessary, and because it creates revenues that can support the clean transition in developing countries. That's what we need. And this includes also to include the carbon sinks that have been mentioned, and you are rich in carbon sinks here, and to reward this contribution. We have to get there. We will discuss this in more detail in the next session, so let us work together to bring a proposal for global carbon pricing and true carbon credits at COP28. And finally, on global energy goals, if we are to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees, we have to speed up the global energy transition. That means if we want to match our goals, we need to triple renewable energy capacity and we need to double energy efficiency by 2030. This sounds bold, but it is doable. If we step up global investment in renewables, this would make clean energy more affordable for all countries, including here in Africa. And this is why COP28 President Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber and I champion an initiative for global targets for the energy transition to be achieved collectively. Because only what gets measured gets done. So, the global goals will provide a benchmark to track the progress and to attract even more private investment. So, I look forward to working with you on this and much, much more. I hope that Africa and Europe will join forces to reach a global agreement at COP28. Ladies and gentlemen, these three proposals may look bold. They may look impossible to achieve. But in the beautiful words of Nelson Mandela, who said, "It always seems impossible until it's done." We have a huge responsibility to fight climate change for the good of our children, for the good of our grandchildren. And I wrote down these beautiful words of the African youth yesterday. Our countries are burning and drowning. As you're not here to save us, we have to trust you now. So, my friends, let's reward the trust of these young people and show responsibility. Let's join forces for COP28. Many thanks. I feel so honored for being invited. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Excellencies, the Nairobi African Leaders Declaration on Climate Change and Call to Action, which we hope that we will get from you, Excellencies, tomorrow, will take a tour of the United Nations Secretary General Summit, then eventually to the UAE for COP28. What better way to start preparing the way for the declaration than by having the COP28 President-designate, Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber, the COP28 President-designate, to address this summit. Dr. Al-Jaber is the Minister of Industry and Advanced Technology of the United Arab Emirates. Welcome, Your Excellency.
Your Excellency, President Ruto, Secretary General Guterres, Your Excellencies, Heads of States, Your Excellencies, Heads of Governments, Your Excellencies, distinguished ministers, honored guests, colleagues, and dear friends. It is indeed my pleasure to be back here in Nairobi and to have the opportunity to share with you my thoughts at this inaugural Africa Climate Summit, where Africa is evidently championing a new vision for climate action. We're gathering here in Nairobi just 3 days before the UNFCCC releases the findings of the first global stocktake. And let's just face it, we already know that the world is way off track, and we know what this report will actually say and what it will conclude. The world is losing the race to secure the goals of the Paris Agreement. And the world is struggling to keep 1.5 within reach. Collectively, must admit that we are not delivering the results we need in the time we need them. We must also accept that business as usual is simply not working, and that business as usual will not allow for a paradigm shift. We need a smart, pragmatic disruption. We need an integrated approach that delivers transformational progress. And we need a plan that leaves no one behind. That is why I have been and I continue on calling on all parties to unite around a plan of action that is fully inclusive, a plan of action that fast-tracks a just, responsible, orderly, and well-managed energy transition, a plan that will focus on people, lives, and livelihoods, and a plan that will finally fix climate finance. Field harvests have exposed 1/5 of Africa's people to hunger, tripled the number of people displaced in the last 3 years, and is dragging down Africa's GDP growth by at least 5% every year. But there is also another narrative that unfortunately is overlooked and in a big way undermined and underestimated, and that needs to get out there. And that is Africa is also a beacon of hope, filled with potential and a global example of what pro-climate and nature-positive development should and must look like. Ethiopia's Green Legacy Initiative is enhancing food security and stimulating green jobs across the Horn of Africa. The countries of the Congo Basin are protecting vital rainforests and helping preserve the world's natural carbon sinks. Kenya is closing on its goal of 100% clean energy by 2030. And the number of sub-Saharan countries in Africa with significant installed solar power has grown 6 times in the last 5 years. This great continent is rich in the resources that can help not just Africa, but the entire world transition to a zero carbon and high growth future. That said, we first need to deal with some realities, and we must accept to come to terms with these facts. Almost half of Africa's population still have no access to electricity. Almost 1 billion people lack clean cooking fuels, and this energy gap will only increase as Africa's population grows. These basic energy needs must be met, and meeting them with low-carbon, nature-positive solutions will meet Africa's development and climate goals at the same time. And the key to making this happen is, of course, finance, and finance, and finance. This finance must be made available. This must be made accessible, and this finance must be made affordable. According to the African Development Bank, $250 billion annually is required to meet Africa's climate finance needs. Africa only receives 12% of that amount, and less than 2% of that is going to adaptation. We can all agree that this is neither just or equitable. We must agree that it is a big missed opportunity. The World Bank estimates that every dollar spent on climate adaptation brings an average of $4 in benefits. It simply makes sense for Africa to get a fairer share of global climate finance. That is why I I am calling on donor countries to close out the $100 billion pledge they made over a decade ago and to replenish the Green Climate Fund. I will continue to press on these issues. I am also calling on donors to double adaptation finance by 2025 and for all parties to transform the global goal on adaptation from theory and text into real action and tangible results. We also need early pledges for the Loss and Damage Fund to help vulnerable countries recover from severe climate impacts that they already are exploring and experiencing. What was promised in Sharm el-Sheikh must be delivered in Dubai. We can no longer accept pledges and announcements without clear roadmaps of implementation. In parallel, we must upgrade our financial architecture. We need a complete upgrade. In fact, we need a surgical intervention of the global financial architecture that was built for a completely different era. IFIs and MDBs must step up, and they must up their game. They need to raise concessional capital and lower debt burdens. They need to attract $4.5 billion that will catalyze at least an additional $12.5 billion from multilateral public and private sources. It is our ambition that this will launch a new transformative partnership to jumpstart a pipeline of bankable clean energy projects in this very important continent. This initiative will target countries with clear transition plans, robust regulatory frameworks, and a real commitment to putting the necessary grid infrastructure in place. It will clearly demonstrate the commercial case for clean energy investments across this very important continent. This initiative is designed to work with Africa and for Africa. It will act as a scalable model that can and should be replicated. And it will support COP28's global goal of tripling renewable energy by 2030. And here, let me take the opportunity to thank His Excellency, the President of Kenya, and his government, and the African Union Commission and the EU Presidency for championing this goal alongside COP28. It's through their leadership that they are choosing a path that makes economic and climate sense at the same time. And let me extend an open invitation to all Africa's leaders to join us at COP28 to help mark a new, ambitious era for Africa's sustainable growth. Ladies and gentlemen, as COP28 approaches, I am determined that it is a turning point that delivers for everyone, everywhere. We don't want to leave anyone behind. Climate change is a global fight, and it demands a global solution. If Africa loses, we all lose. And if Africa succeeds, we all succeed. Progress for one is progress for all. Let's unite, act, and deliver to turn the rhetoric into real results. Let's turn pledges into tangible projects on the ground. And let's launch a new and optimistic future that puts the world on a climate-positive pathway and offers an opportunity for all to prosper. I thank you all, and I look forward receiving you at COP28. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Excellencies, the Nairobi Declaration, like I indicated, will find itself to the UN General Assembly, and we are happy to have with us the UN Secretary General, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, who is both a politician and a diplomat who will guide the discussions and midwife the contents of our declaration to find itself into UN resolutions. Welcome, Your Excellency.
Your Excellency, dear President William Ruto, thank you very much for your initiative, your enthusiasm, and your leadership that brought us together. Asante Sana. Excellencies, friends, an injustice burns at the heart of the climate crisis, and its flame is scorching hopes and possibilities here in Africa. This continent accounts for less than 4% of global emissions, yet it suffers some of the worst effects of rising global temperatures. Extreme heat, ferocious floods, and tens of thousands dead from devastating droughts. The blow inflicted on development is all around, with growing hunger and displacement, shattered infrastructure, systems stretched to the limit, all aggravated by climate chaos not of your making. It is still possible to avoid the worst effects of climate change, but only with a quantum leap in climate action. The people of Africa and people everywhere need action to respond to deadly climate extremes. First, we need far greater climate ambition, with countries hitting fast forward and massively accelerating action to limit temperature rises and impacts. And the largest emitters must lead the charge, in line with my Climate Solidarity Pact and acceleration agenda. And here, from a low-emitting continent, Africa, I make a very strong appeal to the large emitters, to the G20 countries responsible for 80% of the emissions that will be meeting this week in Delhi. Assume your responsibilities. Developed countries must commit to reaching net zero emissions as close as possible to 2040, and large emerging economies as close as possible to 2050, with support from developed countries to do so. And it's time to break our addiction to fossil fuels and invest in a just and equitable transition. We need to see credible plans to exit coal by 2030 for OECD countries and by 2040 for the rest of the world. And we need ambitious renewable energy goals in line with 1.5-degree limit. And we must bring affordable electricity to everyone on Earth, and particularly in Africa, while simultaneously reaching net zero electricity by 2035 in developed countries and 2040 elsewhere. Second, reaching these targets requires climate justice. Developed countries must present a clear and credible roadmap to double adaptation finance by 2025 as a first step towards devoting at least half of all climate finance to adaptation. And they must also keep their promise to provide $100 billion a year to developing countries for climate support and fully replenish the Green Climate Fund. And all countries must also operationalize the Loss and Damage Fund proposed at COP28 this year. Every person on Earth must be covered by an early warning system by 2027 by implementing the action plan we launched last year. And 6 out of every 10 Africans currently lack access to these systems. The early warning for all Africa action plan launched yesterday under the leadership of the African Union will be critical to addressing this need. And more broadly, we need a course correction in the global financial system so that it supports accelerated climate action in the context of sustainable development. And we can't achieve one without the other. And this means an international financial system that is able to provide an effective debt relief mechanism that supports payment suspensions, longer lending terms, lower rates. And it means recapitalizing and changing the business model of multilateral development banks so they can massively leverage private finance at affordable rates to help developing countries build truly sustainable economies. The global financial system must be reformed to be an ally of developing countries as they turbocharge the just and equitable green transition that leaves no one behind. Which brings me to my third point, making Africa a world leader in renewable energy and green growth. This continent is rich in renewable energy potential. Africa is home to 30% of the mineral reserves that are critical to renewable and low-carbon technologies like solar power, electric vehicles, and battery storage. Of course, we must not repeat the mistakes of the past. To truly benefit all Africans, the production and trade of these critical minerals must be sustainable, transparent, and just across every link of the supply chain, with maximum added value produced within African countries. African leadership is also helping to generate innovative green economies anchored in renewable power. From the Greater Horn of Africa, where over 85% of electricity generation comes from renewables, including massive hydropower projects in Ethiopia, Kenya, and Sudan, to wind and solar projects in Egypt, Algeria, Tunisia, and Morocco, to Mozambique, which gets nearly 100% of its energy from green and sustainable sources, to the increased installation of large-scale solar projects, including in South Sudan. At the same time, Africa is home to 60% of the world's best solar resources, but only 2% of global investments in renewable energy over the last 2 decades. Now is the time to bring together African countries with developed countries, financial institutions, and technological companies to create a true African renewable energy alliance. With adequate access to financial resources at reasonable cost and technological support, renewables could dramatically boost economies, grow new industries, create jobs, and drive development, including by reaching the over 600 million Africans living without access to power. Renewable energy could be the African miracle, but we must make it happen. We must all work together for Africa to become a renewable energy superpower. Excellencies, friends, just as the injustice of climate change burns fiercely here in Africa, so do the opportunities. I'm convinced that Africa can be at the heart of a renewable future. The summit and the solutions being discussed here represent a big step forward, but our countries must not be alone in this journey. At the end of this month, I will hold, on the way to COP28, a Climate Ambition Summit to summon the world's attention and committed action to climate change and the need to support developing countries as they transition to a renewable future. Ambition in mitigation must be in parallel with ambition in climate justice. Now is the time for all countries to stand as one in defense of our only home. Let's deliver the climate justice that Africans, the world and the planet we share demand and deserve. Asante sana.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Excellencies, it is the African Union Summit in February that approved the co-hosting of this summit by Kenya and the AU Commission. And to speak to us next on his aspirations for the summit, let us welcome His Excellency President Azali Assoumani, President of the Comoros and the Chairperson of the African Union. Welcome, Your Excellency.
Excellences, Monsieur Ahmed Abako, Dr. William Ruto, Président de la République de Kenya, Monsieur Antonio Guterres, Secretary General,
Your Excellency Guterres, General Secretary of UN, Mr. Faki, President of Commission of AU, Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, ladies and gentlemen, heads of international organizations, and distinguished guests, all protocols observed. Salam alaikum wa barakatuh. At this time, all the eyes are on us, the African continent, united here to discuss at the highest level, thinking on the issue of climate. For this, we think that we are going to succeed here in this beautiful capital city of Nairobi to come up with a new impulse to the dynamics in order to fight against the effects of climate change in our planet village. This is an opportunity for me, first of all, to thank and sincerely thank our brother Ahmed Abako, William Ruto, for his commitment for sustainable and harmonious development. I would also like to thank the people and the government of Kenya for brotherly reception that we enjoyed since we arrived here in this beautiful country, and for the hospitality that we enjoy here in Nairobi. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, when we see what our planet has been undergoing, we have seen devastating effect on our societies, on our economies, on our ecosystem, on our diversity in general. According to the intergovernmental experts working on climate, the world temperature is increasing. It has been increasing since 1990, and we cannot say that this is negligence, but it is the fact that we are not taking into account on this problem, and also the weak action in order to fight this effect. Therefore, we need to intensify our actions because of the effects which are dramatic on our continent, even if we are only responsible for only less than 4% for greenhouse emission. The island states like the Comoro Union, we are experiencing this, and we are not well equipped in order to fight all this. Despite all these challenges, Africa should go ahead and carry out its ambitions as written in policies and strategies at the national and regional level, and also from the contribution at the national level. Therefore, the organization of this summit on climate in this beautiful country has come at the right time so that we can come up with a conventional approach between the countries of the north and the countries of the south by highlighting the shared responsibility through dialogue in order to come up with solutions that are shared. For this, Africa should make profit from this organization so that we can come up with innovative, inclusive, and sustainable solutions by us and for us, and also define the collaboration for concrete climate action on this planet. Ladies and gentlemen, honorable participants, the continent is impacted by negative natural impacts. For example, Comoros, we undergo almost every year a lot of damages and losses from the earthquake, tropical cyclones, and earthquakes, and we lose every year almost $5.7 million. My country, we have carried out programs in order to do the adaptation and mitigation. For mitigation of energy, energy is an important potential by using renewable energy, air energy, photovoltaic energy, in order to produce electricity and reduce the use of firewood in homes and industries. And for our plan of 2030 that we have adopted, our ambition is to make Comoros by 2030 a resilient country to the shocks on all dimensions of sustainable development. As far as adaptation is concerned, for Comoros and other African countries, agriculture sector has been impacted by COVID and the war in Ukraine. That's why it is very important, because we have seen the repercussion of this and aggravated by the food crisis that we have experienced. We have been experiencing on the continent. Therefore, we have to take the opportunity of this summit so that we can identify the actions that we can put in place in order to come up with a food system that is sustainable and resilient in order to guarantee our means of subsistence. And this should be sustainable. We should privilege social actions, innovation, and resilience, and come up with sustainable agriculture methods, protecting our natural resources, our health and our climate. Protection of our resources, air and water resources should be also at the center of our concern. That is why the Moroni Declaration from the Ministerial Conference on Blue Economy and Climate Conference in Africa. This was organized in collaboration with the African Union Commission and UNSCA and the International Commission for Nature and the Indian Commission. They highlighted the work of climate and recognizing the role of seas and oceans in adaptation and mitigation. For this, we call upon the island states of Africa in the negotiations by highlighting their geographical specificity and their vulnerability from extreme events and different environment crises that we've been experiencing. We call upon for the support in order to have sustainable blue economy, generating employment, and come up with a new partnership through reinforcing cooperation of partnership and collaboration. We suggest in this case that the financial aid should be increased. $86 billion given to Africa is very weak in order to support the current costs. We plead again to come up with mechanisms of funding because of damages and losses, coming up with facilities for all the vulnerable African countries, especially the island countries which are developing. It's also important for us Africans to think about the need to own the modern technologies specializing in surveilling climates in order to alert in time our people when extreme events are about to happen. Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, to summarize, I can say that the world threat of climate change and the effect on environment is going to exacerbate the complex nature of the world, which affects women and youth in a disproportionate manner. I would like to say that the Declaration of Nairobi will certainly express our African solidarity, to speak with one voice, to express our African specificities. I am confident that we'll come with the true solutions to the big continental and world challenges that we will also defend at the COP28 that will take place in Republic Arab Emirates. And they need our support through the personal commitment of its President Sheikh Nahdet Al Nahyan, through innovative technology in order to fight effectively against climate change. Asante sana. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Excellencies, now to cap for us this opening session is the chairperson of the Committee of African Heads of State and Government on Climate Change, and also the President of the Republic of Kenya, His Excellency William Samoei Ruto. Welcome, Your Excellency.
Your Excellencies, honorable ministers, distinguished participants, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Kenya. This African moment is a global moment where climate action is actually green growth. I am delighted to be here with you for a number of reasons. First, I am excited to participate in this summit as a scientist who has done some research on ecological impacts of human activity on fragile and precious ecosystems, including rivers and wetlands. I am also privileged to be leading the Kenyan delegation to the Africa Climate Summit. And besides, I have the honor for the time being of serving the young green continent of the future as the chair of CAHOST, the Committee of African Heads of State on Climate Change. And for hosting this event with my good brothers from the AU. And I dare say this conversation is happening in the right city, where the UN has the global environmental capital, where we have UNEP. I am therefore highly encouraged by your strong response for our invitation to attend and participate in this inaugural transformative Continental Assembly convened to focus on climate action from the standpoint of generating African solutions to global challenges. The participation in the numerous events that make up this summit has so far demonstrated impressive commitment, extraordinary enthusiasm, exemplary motivation, and unparalleled determination to confront the problems clarify issues, engage inclusively, and define a unique strategy platform for the implementation of bold interventions to catalyze progress in the global climate action agenda. I welcome you to Nairobi, our burgeoning and sleepless green city in the sun that is bounded by a national wildlife park and a close canopy of indigenous forest. In between, our capital pulsates with the restless energy of community, enterprise, industry, innovation, learning, fun, and adventure. Please feel at home and find time to enjoy the sights and sounds of our city and country. And when I say welcome home, it's both figuratively but also in reality. I did say yesterday, I did inform the participants yesterday that Kenya, where you are sitting, a few kilometers from where you are sitting, has been discovered the earliest remains of man on Earth. And it means that before you guys went all over the place in Africa, Europe, and America, and the rest of the world, we all began from here. And therefore, it is correct for me to tell you, welcome home. And while you are away, these are the greetings, just so that you find your way around. Jambo is the greetings. Maybe, and when somebody else tells you Jambo, you reply Jambo. It's simple. Jambo. Good. I will take you one more step. When you want to say, how are you? You say Mambo. Simple. And then the reply is Poa. Okay, let's go. Mambo. Good. There you go. So I'm sure you'll find your way around with that. Africa is a very young continent. Our median age is 19. Africa's youthfulness is precisely the attribute that has inspired African leaders to imagine a future where Africa finally steps into the stage as an economic and industrial power, an effective and positive actor on a global arena. I am very proud because of this realization, and it has motivated Africa's leaders to create meaningful opportunities for young people to participate in, contribute to, and take charge of consequential endeavors in many sectors. This bold policy is already transforming the strategic landscape of climate action and is swiftly propelling our continent to a focal point of global sustainability agenda. On Sunday, at the Youth Summit, we saw for ourselves the immensity of the potential that we can unleash simply by facilitating positive youth action at all levels in every sector. Potential and opportunity are both futuristic propositions. The African Climate Summit has been designed to enable us locate our intense engagements and the most energized discourse in order to facilitate imaginative, problem-solving, and innovative interventions that are bold enough to meet the critical challenges of the present and future times. This is why potential, opportunity, the future, and youth are recurrent themes that underlie our interactions in this summit. We have convened here to consult, deliberate, and collaborate in imagining and designing the future of climate action globally
and its implications for African aspirations to achieve shared prosperity within one generation. This summit is dedicated exclusively to the transformation of potential into opportunity, the conversion of ideas into actions, and the turning of plans into results. It is about creating a firm consensus, designing effective strategies, securing commitments, and forging transformative partnerships that will drive climate action in the direction and at the rate required to pull our continent and planet back from the brink of a climate disaster. The urgency of this moment is informed by the knowledge that climate change is the greatest challenge, not only to the well-being of humanity, but to every existence of life on Earth, and that only urgent and coordinated action on a global scale can stop the impending catastrophe by lowering greenhouse gas emissions and reducing their concentration in the atmosphere. This is an immense and formidable challenge, even at the best of times. However, the time we are in, and in which we must implement this urgent and daunting undertaking, is a complicated and difficult time for nations throughout the world. Regional conflict with geopolitical ramifications have compounded the disruptive impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic to throw global supply chains into disarray, slowing down economies, raising the cost of living, suppressing economic growth, and straining food systems to a breaking point. The complex interplay of these circumstances also combine with other localized vulnerabilities to drive adversity in many communities, placing intense pressure on governments to reconfigure resources, allocation, and other strategic interventions. In short, it would be understandable if African leaders prioritized other commitments and relegated climate action to an afterthought. This is why I proudly celebrate the courage and imagination with which the people of Africa and their leaders have converged with extraordinary focus and commitment on the climate agenda, not as an additional or peripheral concern for public policy, but as the foremost priority and the defining intervention in our collective journey to shared prosperity. As a result, patient consultation, thorough debate, determined collaboration, and bold confrontation of facts in issue, it has become clear to us at the Africa Union, under the aegis of the Committee of African Heads of State on Climate Change, that tackling climate change also produces the solutions for the complex, interconnected crisis that we face today. This is what this summit is designed to underscore. Collectively, we hold the power to transform the current continental and global trajectory. More critically, we all have an urgent responsibility to do so with a sense of collective purpose that matches the sense of urgency demonstrated by Africa's young people at the Youth Summit earlier this week. Although we are gathered here to explore the means by which we can unite in action for the greater good, we have taken full account of the fact that we are not all at the same place in terms of our experiences with climate change. All countries struggle to achieve socio-economic progress under various constraints. Due to a range of complex and interconnected historical, political, and economic factors, African countries struggle with unique inordinate, and incredibly complex structural drawbacks in the quest to provide opportunities for their peoples to achieve prosperity. Nevertheless, we have all, in our different ways, succeeded in making progress over the years amid these extraordinary difficulties. The tragedy of climate change is that it is relentlessly eating away at this progress. And going by evidence based on scientific projections, its appetite to consume our GDP will grow in years to come. We are already losing between 5 and 15% of our GDP growth every year to the adverse impacts of climate change. At the same time, the cost of adaptation continues to rise along with the cost of living, while the cost of development capital for African countries remains prohibitive, as millions of our youth remain unemployed. Only rapid and inclusive transformation powered by robust industrialization can place us firmly on a path towards sustainable resolution of these challenges. A sound understanding of the nature and causes of climate change, coupled with our experience of its devastating effects, has provided us with a robust early warning system that the classical economic development progression precedent is not available for us as a pathway to this transformation. As Africans, we are strongly persuaded that not only is it urgent for us to execute an audacious leapfrogging of the traditional developmental pathway to industrialization, but urgent ecological imperatives also dictate that we must go green first before industrializing, and not vice versa, like the advanced industrial economies had the luxury to do. I emphasize this point to underscore the principle underlying Africa's position on climate action agenda and the foundation of our strategic, institutional, and policy direction. We have an unprecedented opportunity to abandon the well-trodden yet unsustainable path of the past and forge a new route that aligns economic inclusion and shared prosperity with climate commitment imperatives. Africa's low rate of greenhouse gas emissions must not relegate us to the margins and footnotes of the global climate agenda. Africa must step forward as the cornerstone around which effective climate solutions are built. Yesterday, I encouraged participants in this summit to disregard the grievance standpoint and instead consider climate action imperative through an opportunity lens. As soon as we do that, a nexus of feasible sequences begins to emerge in an unbroken continuum from potential to opportunity, and through investments and technological innovation into green manufacturing and industrialization, including shared prosperity. Our untapped renewable energy potential, together with the world's youngest population of skilled, motivated, and knowledgeable industrial men and women, along with Africa's abundant endowment of natural assets from carbon sinks to arable land and mineral wealth, confer on us the indispensable fundamentals to swiftly become a cost-competitive industrial hub with ample capacity to decarbonize global manufacturing and green the economies of our continent, our neighborhoods, and the globe. It is good for us to be open about the need to confront a couple of basic truths. First, it is demonstrably clear that none of the world's industrialized nations will be able to achieve their net zero goals within the time indicated by scientists to avert further warming. Secondly, unlocking Africa's potential to undertake economic transformation along a green trajectory is the most feasible, just, and efficient way to attain a net zero world by 2050. With those two combined, Africa's capacity to limit its own emissions is the clearest pathway to enable the world to achieve its climate action targets. Africa's opportunity is a global opportunity and a chance for humanity to redeem its intergenerational legacy. Scientific experts have consistently demonstrated, from analyzing available evidence and making projections, that these can be achieved while generating jobs in their millions, creating enormous investment opportunities, and catalyzing unprecedented economic growth. Under a proper green growth paradigm, climate action also serves as a robust engine for poverty reduction, employment and wealth creation, and economic transformation. By definition, effective climate action must entail technological leapfrogging to disrupt and invent the industrial development pathway and go green first. It must also involve effective decarbonization of global production and supply chains and deliberate efforts to remove carbon from the atmosphere at scale. Understood this way, green growth aligns perfectly with opportunity-oriented perspectives of climate change, which presents Africa with its most important means of achieving stability, prosperity, and development beyond middle-income industrial status. To achieve green growth, we in Africa have committed to move with speed and under various effective frameworks to develop the necessary instruments, institutions, policies, and strategies through which we shall design and implement incentives that will accelerate the delivery of priority actions. We shall also support our youth, especially those in enterprise, to enable innovation and deliver localized solutions for the benefit of our communities, and at the same time attract other African and international investors to finance climate action. Every step of this journey will require partnership that facilitate collaboration and multilateral collective action to achieve just development financing mechanisms, deliver equitable access to markets for Africa's green products and services, and a just regime that provides liquidity, debt relief, and affordable investment capital everywhere on the continent at scale. We are all connected to our common humanity and a shared stake in the vitality and livability of our planet. We are also bound firmly by the fact that Earth is all we have, that we have no other home, and that no alternative planet to resort to when things burn here. The most salient implication of this knowledge is that we cannot approach climate action and human development from a disconnected or adversarial standpoint. We cannot pursue climate action through insular, solitary policies. Global warming cannot be mitigated by air conditioning our little pockets and corners of the world. Prosperity cannot and must not be pursued in a zero-sum, exclusive fashion, because the resulting injustice and inequality are the drivers of inequity, poverty, conflict, and activities that threaten biodiversity and encourage pollution. We are all interconnected. That is a statement of fact. And this existential moment provides us with a unique opportunity to reconnect with our shared humanity. In this summit, you will have heard and will continue to learn more about the bold, transformative, innovative fruits of partnerships, cooperation, and collaboration that are already underway in various parts of Africa. I invite you to pay close attention to as many of these cases as possible, and assure you that you will be surprised, challenged, and inspired by the many wonderful demonstrations of bold initiatives in the face of many opportunities. That is the essence of this summit. It is an orientation, and in fact an orientation run designed to familiarize us with our journey into the future, driven by African solutions, powered by African resources, and anchored on African opportunities. The collaboration I have in mind must be bold in ambition, broad in scope for their vision, deep in terms of diversity of their stakeholders, and long in terms of their geographical reach. An impressive example that I have had opportunity to interact with is the Global Center for Adaptation, an organization based in Rotterdam in the Netherlands, whose constitution is an appealing emblem of our aspiration, from the aspirational design of its global headquarters and futuristic regional headquarters in Nairobi, comprising green walls and roofs as well as rain gardens, to the collaborative culture of its staff. Unsurprisingly, the center is intended to inspire the world to thrive with nature instead of pursuing the dangerous course of seeking to thrive at the expense of nature. The center spearheads the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program, a focal point collaboration with the University of Nairobi, Africa Development Bank, and the Africa Union Commission as part of the continent's response to the climate crisis. I am delighted to announce that as an outcome of this summit today, Kenya will host the GCA Africa headquarters here in Nairobi. Ladies and gentlemen, it has taken tremendous courage, effort, and determination to leave behind us the old continent that was historically profiled with intense negativity. The Africa whose people neither are there to be seen or heard has summoned the confidence and why? Because we have been profiled negatively. The continent of disease, war, poverty. But we are stepping forward to say, look here. Africa is the continent with 60% of the world's renewable energy assets. Whether you talk about wind, whether you talk about solar, geothermal, hydropower. Number two, we're saying Africa is the continent that has 40% of the world's critical minerals for energy transition, whether you talk about nickel, cobalt, lithium, manganese. This is where those reserves are. Number three, This is the continent, the youngest continent with a median age of 19. 25% of the world's population will be living in this continent by 2050. We will have 40% of the world's workforce by 2100. This is the continent